You're listening to Biz-Souls, the business podcast with an edge, hosted by me, Rona Lewis, and Jeffrey Hansler. Tune in for perspectives and discoveries about the changing world of business. It's time to connect to the heart, soul, and humor of how business gets done. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Biz-Souls. I'm Rona Lewis.
I'm Jeffrey Hansler, and we get to the heart and soul of business and the people that make it happen.
Yes, and today, I'm going to say it again, we have our recurring champion, Nick Morton, our favorite food and beverage guy, to talk about René Redzepi, right? Did I say it right? Okay.
Correct.
And he is a Michelin-starred chef, well, his restaurant, who had to step down because of shenanigans that went on backstage, and it goes on a lot in the restaurant industry, doesn't it?
And
it sure does. And I'm gonna answer your question and talk about René Redzepi,
Yeah.
but I want to sidebar for one split second, because as I've written this article, I can only speak with authority on the restaurant, hotel, hospitality industry at large, right? Because that's my area of expertise. I've worked in it for the better part of
100 years,
45 plus years now, right? But I'd like to point out that this type of volunteer work and internship happens in industries all over the world. I'll give you a couple of recent examples that I've been watching this ever since I wrote the article, my article, Hospitality Without Humanity Isn't Hospitality. So I'm on the website to try to get tickets to the LA 28 Olympics, right? And I'm doing all the dance. It's difficult as hell to get tickets, by the way.
Yeah.
But I noticed there that you can volunteer for free. And it struck me, right? So there's game day volunteers, there's people who want to volunteer to be ticket takers, all this kind of stuff. Like, why does the Olympics, right? One of the most profitable things on the planet, comes out every 4 years in the summer, every 4 years in the winter. Why do they need free unpaid volunteers when the corporate sponsorships are in the billions of dollars, right? Now, I was also at, the FIFA World Cup. There was a demonstration game here in Seattle this week between the U.S. women's national team and the Japanese women's national team. Great game, unbelievable, loved it, every minute of it. On the way out, dying for a hot dog, never got a hot dog, walk up to the stand, and there was like a woman closing down her shop at the end of the game, and I said, "Do you have one hot dog left so I can get a hot dog?" And we start chit-chatting. She was a volunteer. And I'm like, I didn't ask her this because she was working, and I said, why the hell does the FIFA World Cup need a volunteer? Again, billions and billions of dollars in sponsorship money, et cetera, et cetera. The tickets are thousands of, this was a demonstration game, not the official World Cup, but they're thousands of dollars. They're unaffordable. So why do you need volunteers? And lastly, I was at the US Open Golf at Shinnecock Country Club. This was a number of years ago, 7 or 8 years ago. And a friend of ours who lived in the Southampton area decided she was going to volunteer to steer guests into their seats or whatever the case may be. And the only pay she got out of that was she was able to watch the match.
Right.
Why does Shinnecock Country Club, where the dues are, what are they, $1 million a year, 400,000, 500,000?
Something like that. Yeah.
Why do they need volunteers for one of the most profitable sporting events in the world?
Because
so
they
it's
can.
not the hospitality industry.
Yeah.
Many industries. You can go, law firms have it, some are interns, so on and so forth, right? But I'm not denigrating any other industry. I can only speak about mine. And so if I backtrack a little bit and say, a lot of this started with the setup in the kitchen going back to Auguste Escoffier in the 1800s, right? Or early 1900s, forget the era. And he set up a system to organize the kitchen and make it more functional. And he used the military as a guide, right? That hierarchy, right? There's the chef at the top of the pyramid, if you will, equal to the general. And then you have a sous chef who's underneath him, equal to the colonels, and so on down the line as you get to, all the different levels in the kitchen to these startup cooks. And in the true old days of Escoffier's era, you'd have people that would stage the term for an unpaid intern, for months at a time because they wanted to learn from this great chef, right? But what happened over the decades and decades since is that it became entrenched that a lot of these businesses more on the high-end restaurants than the casual local joints that we probably frequent more often, had a lot of unpaid interns. People who would come in, they'd work for months and months at a time because they want to learn from this great chef. In theory, it's not a bad deal, right? You might not have otherwise gotten that job because you're not experienced, but now you get to work for free, but you get to learn. But what's happened in the intervening century or whatever since Escoffier set this up is that abuse has become rampant. And it's the emotional abuse that a lot of chefs put out, this physical abuse that we've read about with René Redzepi specifically and others. And I don't want to just call him out. Marco Pierre White, a London chef, was renowned for his fiery temper, right? Throwing pans, the whole kind of thing. And I had a different path, right? I was a cook in my early days. And Rona, you remember?
I remember those days.
I had my first pizza restaurant, and before that, I had cooked at a place called Tumbledown Dick's. And I had worked with chefs who were, volatile, right? I mean, they were either bipolar or something's wrong with them, and they're pissed off because you overcooked a steak or whatever the case may be. And I just swore that I would never be like that. And at one point, I used this example regularly. I had a guy named Jimmy Cliff. I can never really remember his last name. I know it was Jimmy, and he was Jamaican. And so Jimmy Cliff is my imaginary name for him. But Jimmy was a great guy, like biggest smile on the planet. He taught me how to turn a steak. He taught me how to cook vegetables. He taught me how to blanch carrots so that they were just barely cooked, and then you can kiss them with butter and make them perfect. And my favorite recipe is a quiche he taught me how to make, that I would use that recipe to this day, know it by heart. But he was a mentor, and he just smiled at you and told you how to do it. Now, it doesn't mean he didn't curse, doesn't mean he didn't get pissed off when things went wrong, because it happens. But that's my model, and I swore that I would never work that way in the industry going forward. And I believe I've kept that promise to myself and the people who work for me.
Well, you bring up a really good point because, first of all, the socialist movement's moving on in New York, and they're talking about, taxing the rich to take care of the, people that don't have as much. And they're completely missing this point, because for somebody that wants that interns, if you go to an elite school or you go to a school and then you intern, that means you have to have the resources behind you so that you can live, pay, and do all that, which really hurts the those that are coming up and using education to, improve their economic state, and their family may be struggling just to get them to school. So you're bringing up an excellent point, and I think that culture sets up the problem where people become abusive. Hey, right. We don't pay you anything. You're therefore, in the mind, you're not worth anything, and you should be grateful for the tidbits that I'm teaching you. And so it would be, once again, I'm not into big government. The politicians, don't think this way because they really don't think, actually. So we should, this would be a great political stance for somebody to take on and say, this is one thing we can do to help people pick themselves up by their bootstraps and pay them an internship. Yeah. I agree with you 100%. And I think it's the core of the problem.
And just to say real quick, I had a friend I went to college with who interned in politics, and there's a lot of abuse in politics, same thing. So
same thing. Wall Street. I mean, you could go down the list of industries around the planet, whether it's tech, whether it's Wall Street. I mean, how many people work for free because they want to get their foot in the door?
I did. I had a college internship. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I interned at a veterinary hospital while I was thinking about being a veterinarian.
Right.
So and there was one vet who paid. He said, hey, I pay you. You're going to do a job, and I'm going to hold you accountable to it.
I just got college credit. I did not get paid.
Yeah, and there's a balance in however this works out, right? So, like, over the years, I've worked with culinary schools that because the student is paying tuition and they go to school, they had to do a month or 2 or 3 in a restaurant, but ultimately they were getting subsidized. The internship was being subsidized by the school. And I kind of get that, because it's a very, very short run, and you're not asking someone to buy a plane ticket to take them 8,000 miles away to find a place to live. You're dealing with something in your local community that is part of your education that you are paying for already. I kind of get that kind of mindset on internship, and but what bothers me is not so much the mindset of having an intern or a stage. It is the abuse and the exploitation, if you will, of unpaid labor, right? As opposed to, did you really teach that person something, or did you really teach them in the negative way about, how bad a leader you are? I mean, I can really go out on a tangent on that.
Right.
I'm not going. Yeah.
So it's getting back to the direct subject at hand. There is abuse throughout the industry. So why did this one escalate to this point and not others? What was, was it the fact that the abuse was worse, or was it the fact that the people just spoke out and felt?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. I think it was, the abuse was always bad and it was always occurring. But I think that people had just finally got fed up. Former interns at Noma had finally gotten fed up with reading about this guy in the papers, and now he's coming to LA. I think what precipitated this, it was coming to LA to do a pop-up at $1,500 a plate a person, right, for his pop-up. And I think there were a lot of interns out there who just got fed up and started speaking out about the level of abuse. It got picked up with the New York Times, did some great reporting on it.
Right.
And then it's been enhanced from there from people like myself who wrote an article on it. CNN wrote another article on it. And it's just, I think people have finally gotten tired of this mindset of, and not to get us off track, but the mindset of the genius chef. René Redzepi, he's the genius. He's influenced everyone on the planet and how it goes. I can honestly say he didn't.
Yeah.
I never went there. I never wanted to. There was nothing about his style of cooking and food that intrigued me enough to pay thousands of dollars to fly across the world to go sit in his restaurant in this severe kind of inhospitable environment, as I look at it. That's not what I want. I want the warmth and hospitality. I want to talk to my servers. I want to know the sommelier, all that kind of stuff. So it wasn't my place, but people started speaking out, and then it just snowballed and got picked up from there. And I think you go back a little bit further, 5, 6, 7 years ago, before the pandemic, people were getting a little bit tired of this. During the pandemic, we realized how difficult it is for service workers, getting low wages, living on tips, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's become a national conversation. And it's more than about time that it has.
I agree.
The industry needs to make some changes. And the pandemic kind of forced a lot of this bubbling up to the surface. Maybe it would have come out 5 years later, or 5 years from now, or 10 years from now. But because of the pandemic and the difficulties that we all experienced during that time, it kind of forced this conversation to the surface. I, for one, am glad it did, because it's time to rip the scab off and let's find a way to heal our industry, because I love it. I think there's a lot of good in my industry.
Yeah. Yeah. And yes, I watch a lot of food TV, of various kind. And you can usually tell when a chef who is a guest or a guest judge or whatever, is authentic and, and, truly a kind person, or at least doesn't let their ego get in the way of treating their people right. And then there are others who have television shows that you can just tell are just jerks.
Yeah, they are.
They can't hide it.
And it to me, as a I've always been the behind the scenes operator, right? I'm not the celebrity chef out front. I'm not the celebrity owner.
You're a celebrity to us.
Well, thank you very much. So I've always been the guy behind the scenes trying to make things work evenly and taking care of the people. And I get offended when I look at these TV shows. There's, every year there's a new one on, what chef yelling at some restaurant because they didn't do this, he's turning it around. I mean, it's just been a plethora of them, and they're all bad, in my opinion. Yeah. It's great, quote, entertainment, if you will, if you like that sort of thing. I don't. And I think it sheds a spotlight on the negativity that shouldn't be there, as opposed to the mentorship and leadership that should be there.
Yeah, I kind of boycotted Bear. Good actors, everything, good subject. It just promoted the culture of abuse. It was just, it's just a real negative culture, and people are influenced by that. They think, this is the way it should be.
Yeah, that's not me either. grudgingly started watching The Bear. Initially, it was just I just didn't want to watch a show about my industry because it makes me feel like I'm working, right?
Yeah, it's a busman's holiday. Yeah.
Yeah, and I do, I like to read, do whatever, so I'd rather read a book than watch The Bear. But when push came to shove, somewhere in the second season, my wife and I started watching it, and I reluctantly said, okay, great TV, great acting, Jamie Lee Curtis, one of my all-time favorite actresses. Everyone was great, but it was over the top in enhancing this abusive mindset in the industry that it could have shown a different light. It could have shown a little, well, they tried to show a little bit of the mentorship, right?
Yeah.
There was the woman in Chicago, I think it was, the chef,
Mm-hmm.
Female chef in Chicago, I forget her name, who was very, mild, and she was closing the restaurant, but she was teaching her staff how to do things. And, cousin, learned from her and then came back all the better. So like there were some good parts to it. So I'm not knocking the whole entirety of the show. But as Jerry Allen White's character, when he's always thinking back to the days where he was abused by this hard-ass chef, and he
Right.
finally confronts him. And like my whole feeling is that we're entrenching bad behavior, and in some instances we're rewarding bad behavior, right? A lot of these great chefs, theoretically great chefs, I should say, who are really bad actors, are lauded in the press for being geniuses, and we're kind of overlooking the negativity. And I think that's finally coming back, circling around to haunt those chefs and owners. It's not just chefs; it's coworkers, it's employees, and so on.
So I think the powers that be believe that it makes better TV, whereas something like the Great British Baking Show, it's just a delightful show, and
Right.
it's like I love that show because it is very positive and it makes people feel good. So I just think the American audiences or the American TV executives have it a little wonky.
Yeah, I think people are looking for that adrenaline high they get from watching someone else berate someone
Exactly.
else. Whatever
Exactly.
the case may be.
Yeah. It's not me.
And-
So yeah.
And let's be realistic. If you did a whole show about the way I worked my whole career, it's kind of boring, right?
Exactly.
Lugging away day in and day out.
Not that you're boring, just that
yeah, it's not as exciting as watching, like someone really get pounded into the stove.
Beat me, whip me, call me Helen. Yeah.
So Gordon Ramsay was fairly authoritarian and
abusive.
rough,
Say it.
rough.
Abusive. Yeah.
So why did he get away with it? Has society changed, or was this also the combination of it got physical? And I don't.
Well, it was they accuse him of physical and psychological abuse.
Yeah.
And Gordon, since you brought him up, every show Gordon Ramsay does, he yells at people.
Right.
And
so it's
I
verbal.
don't like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like that. I don't think you need to do that.
Me neither.
But Gordon Ramsay, at one point, was because I don't consider him a true chef anymore. I consider him an entertainer. Period.
Yeah.
Right. But at one point, he was a brilliant chef.
Uh-huh.
But he was a brilliant chef with a temper, and he has monetized that temper into this plethora of shows. He's probably the most successful former chef on the planet, right? With all these TV shows he's got. I just don't like the ethos. I never have. I never will. And so I think, I can't speak to how he operated his kitchens, but I know what I see on TV. He's yelling constantly. I've never heard that he's been physically abusive. And I think what's really flipped the switch is the physical abuse and the emotional abuse. And I'd like to, maybe we should bifurcate a little bit on certain things, right? I'm okay if someone would have cursed, right? I'm not an altar. Well, I was an altar boy, but I'm not now, right? So,
and we're from New York. It just happens.
It just happens, right? In the heat of fire. I use the example of my former partner and celebrity chef Tom Colicchio, right? Who I hold in high regard. And Tom was the kind of guy, like in the middle of service, you got a couple of hundred people in your restaurant. Orders are flying in faster than you can keep up, and he's trying to manage everything, and something goes wrong, and out of the middle of everything, he's like drop an F-bomb, like why the how did this happen, right? Then later on, he might, right, as soon as everything calms down, he'd go put his arm around that line cook, say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to yell at you. let's focus on this. Let's do this the better way next time, right? And I'm okay with that because we all have a moment in the heat of battle. We can lose it. We've done it with our spouses, our significant others, our kids, our friends. We've all had moments of intense emotion. You two guys?
Both of us.
Never.
So I think we have to differentiate between the in the heat of the moment, momentary anger, even if there's a curse word involved, right? As opposed to the sustained verbal and physical abuse, which I do not hold. I do not believe in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody does who's not doing it. It's just ridiculous. And it makes me happy that bad behavior is finally being called out everywhere.
Yeah. And and I'll throw something that I maybe I can help on my own Substack and write a little bit more about this. But there's a lot of stories of great chefs out there, like my Jimmy Cliff from my Tumble Down Nick's era, right? There's a lot of great chefs and great owners. I worked with one of them, Danny Meyer, right? Who I consider a friend and a mentor, right? He's not the guy who yells, right? I mean, he's got his quirks. He's made his mistakes. He's not perfect by any stretch. But there's the idea of helping to build people up as opposed to tearing them down.
Yeah.
And I've been fortunate to work with innumerable people like that. And I think we're missing that. We make it seem like the entire hospitality industry is made up of the Gordon Ramsay and René Redzepi types. And that's not the case.
Right.
It is a very high percentage of people, unfortunately, that have that attitude because it's been self-propagating over the years. But there's an enormous amount of people who don't yell, who are calm, cool, and collected, and rather mentor and teach. And I've worked with so many of them. I'd like to tell those stories. I'd like us to hear that, so that the positive reinforcement about the good guys finish first, as opposed to the good guys finish last.
Right.
Well, we'll have you on again, and we'll do a positive spin on chefs and things like that. So people can get that. Yeah. We'll do that.
And to your point, Nick, even, the Jews have Moses, he lost his cool, and we have Jesus, and Jesus lost his cool, and, in the temple.
Look what happened there.
So, and it all worked out in the end. So, hey, real quick, though, before we go, because we're going to sign off quick. What's going on with you? What have you been up to? In 2 minutes or less.
Yeah.
2 minutes or less. I am... looking forward to the summer. I am working on a book called Life Behind Bars, and it is my take. I started this a number of years ago, put it aside for a couple of years, especially during the pandemic. But the idea is that it is my look back at the hospitality industry from my start to today, and telling the tall tales, if you will, and the good stories about the people that I worked with and the lessons and learnings along the way. And trying to put a positive spin on the industry. And so I'll be working on that, and a parallel path talking about most people know me as, mixologist, right? The creator of the honeydews and things like that. So kind of intersperse both sides of my career into one book, but a positive spin on the hospitality industry, because there's a lot of good there and there's a lot of good people there.
Well, good. Say nice things about the Upper West Side. From our days on the Upper West Side.
My formative years there.
That's right, the whole gang. Anyway, well, I'm so glad we got to talk about this a little bit, because your article really did resonate with me. So
thank you.
Write more, and we will have you on again. And as things come out, we'll talk about. When are you expecting the book to come out?
I think it's about a year away. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
So I got a lot more writing to do, and I got to sell it. Otherwise, I'll sell.
What are we doing on here? Get going! Come on. We don't have time to waste. Anyway,
I'll start posting some of it on my Substack over the next couple of months.
Oh, good.
A few chapters here and there. So
anyway.
Outstanding.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
I always love having you on here, and I love you. So there you go.
Thank you, Rona. Appreciate it.
All right, that is it for us. I'm Rona Lewis.
I'm Jeffrey Hansler.
And this has been Biz-Souls. We'll see you next time, everybody.
Thanks, you.
Guys. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Biz-Souls podcast with your hosts, Rona Lewis and Jeffrey Hansler. Did you have fun? Subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It's very much appreciated. Talk to you next week.